Alrighty, let's see if we can make this happen. This is a test of Facebook Live video. I have no idea if it's going to be working. Facebook Live video. I have no idea if it's going to be. That was me watching myself. I don't know if anybody else is watching. As far as I can tell, I am the only person here. You'll see that I'm looking at the screen to my right, which is that way when you're watching on camera. So this is a test of using Facebook Live video. Everybody in the world seems to be doing it, and I just wanted to give it a chance. The disappointment with Facebook Live video is that what I had to do to make this work is set up my mobile device. I only have, you can only do Facebook Live video using a mobile device. Here I've got, my desktop computer sitting here to my right. I've got a really good webcam. I have other technology that I could be using to make this happen. But as it turns out, I can apparently only use my phone. So I've had to, between some shoestrings, some baling wires, some chewing gum, I've got my phone sitting here on a little tripod type thing. You can tell I've got my lavalier mic because the phone, it's arm's reach from me. You can see this is about however long that is. So this sounds better. It's at least something that I tested a while back. I had to get a special adapter for the phone so that I could actually plug in an extra microphone. But it seems to be working. Now, the other part of this that makes that made Facebook Live possible is my internet connection. And while I'm going to wait for just a little bit for some questions to collect up, and I will answer some of the questions that I see scrolling by. But one of the reasons that the actual video looks a little bit better this time than when I did a test about a month ago is that I have a new internet connection. And behind that is a story. So I live in a neighborhood that was developed about 30 years ago. It was originally, I believe I'm sitting on what used to be a dairy farm. And at the time when they developed it, what they did was they divided it into 5-acre parcels. So we're sitting on just under 5 acres. When they built it, they put all the wiring underground. And that included, of course, power, telephone, all the other utilities are down there. But what they did not do is they did not bury cable for cable television. They decided not to do that. And 30 years ago, what that meant is if you drove through this neighborhood, what you would see are the old 3-meter, 10-foot satellite dishes, the huge ones, the big ugly dishes as they were called. We had one of those for many years. Because this was before the era of DirecTV and Dish Network with the smaller dishes. People were using the big dishes to go out and get their TV. Internet was interesting because it was 30 years ago that the phone system was installed, so we had 30-year-old phone equipment. So in this house, literally in this office, I have had over the years dial-up. If some of you may remember something called ISDN. So dial-up got me to about 33 kbits per second. ISDN was one of the earliest digital technologies, and it maxed out at 128 kilobits per second. Had that for a while. It was fairly expensive. At that time, it was considered a professional connection. In fact, at the time when radio stations did live remotes, often it was an ISDN connection that they would use to go back to their radio station to get the audio back at high quality. So we did that. Did do DSL for quite some time. DSL, I ended up, the provider that I started with kind of sort of sucked. So I ended up changing providers. It was the story there is that the provider I was using at the time refused to understand that I knew what I was talking about and forced me to go through their script every time. I think Bob Rankin actually published an article today on exactly how so much customer support is intentionally frustrating. Well, this was intentionally or not very, very frustrating at the time. I ended up switching providers, DSL providers, but the technology remained the same. And our bandwidth at the time was a nice maximum 768K down and 128K up. That did me for a while. Then as Ask Leo continued to grow, I decided I needed something better. So I ended up getting what was called a T1 line. T1s were very expensive, and they gave you 1.54 megabits per second in both directions. At the time, that seemed really cool. Now, that's nothing, but then it was very cool. The other thing about about a T1 is that when you pay for it, like I said, they're expensive. What you end up with is business class service. So if there was a problem with the service and you called up, you would end up with a technician on site within a couple of hours. That's the kind of service that you don't get with DSL, your consumer level DSL or cable or whatever. So I did that for a long time. Then, of course, 1.54 megabits was too slow, so I ended up getting two T1s. So I got a grand total of like 3 megabits. Again, bidirectional, unlimited, great support, and a lot of money every month. So eventually, 3 megabits, of course, became too slow. 3 megabits was, like I said, nice for a really long time, but eventually, as things happened, that wasn't working for us. So what I ended up looking into was my mobile provider. I happened to use Verizon. Actually, before that, Clearwire came along. And as it turned out, Clearwire used something called WiMAX, a wireless technology. And as it turned out, from a point in my house, I actually had a clear view of one of the Clearwire transmission. It's not a tower. They're more widely distributed on telephone poles and such. But I had a clear view of one of their nodes and got a really strong signal. So I signed up for Clearwire. And yes, one of the neat things about being live is you can probably hear my phone in the background. Well, it apparently went away already. It's one of the other thing you may hear today, of course, are the dogs, if the dogs end up barking. Anyway, Clearwire. So we ended up doing Clearwire for some time. Clearwire was actually pretty cool because I ended up getting like 10 megabits download and a 1 megabit or 2 megabits upload. I even signed up for their Clearwire business plan, which meant, again, there goes the phone. Yep. I'll have to answer that one later. So the issue was that Clearwire got purchased by Sprint and they shut down the network, and the business service was the very first thing to go. So of course, I was out of luck. I switched to Clearwire Consumer, which gave me another year's worth of connectivity, but then that too went away. And the Clearwire technology, WiMAX, also ended up going away. So that's when I started looking at my mobile provider, because I also happen to have a very strong mobile signal from some parts of my house here. And that's what I ended up doing then for about, I'd say, a year or so, maybe more. I actually used a data plan from Sprint for a while. Sprint actually gave me really good coverage here, and Verizon gives me really good coverage here. The speeds were great. 20 megabits down. I think I would even occasionally get 20 megabits up, which is kind of fun. But the problem with the mobile providers is that they have a data cap. And I don't know about you, but I chew through data like crazy, especially with how much I talk about backing up. I do a lot of backing up to servers on the cloud. And as a result, I was chewing through data at an incredible rate. And of course, you can pay more money to a certain point, but it ends up still getting really, really expensive. So that's how I was running until, I'll say late last year. I had, like I said, I had a couple of wireless dongles connected to a router up in a bedroom that was then wired to the rest of the house that gave us our internet. The what happened, what was really interesting is someone moved into our neighborhood. So I'm going to have to actually pause this Facebook Live. I will continue the story in just a couple of minutes. That's my wife trying to reach me. I will actually come back with some more Facebook Live in just a few minutes. So hang on, I'll be back. And we're back. So yes, it's one of those unspoken rules when the wife calls you on your landline and then your mobile phone, it's probably worth answering, and it was. So where were we? We were talking about my Wi-Fi connection. I'm sorry, my wireless connection. The fact that I was using my mobile provider to provide me internet here at home. And let's see. I also want to make sure that I'm watching this, or at least can see this showing up on the desktop version of. There we are, part 2. So, as it turns out, around the end of last year, someone moved into our neighborhood that didn't realize how bad our internet situation was. Because not only did we not have cable in the neighborhood, but the DSL was actually kind of interesting. We had 30-year-old phone equipment, and in fact, because a vice president of the phone company at the time used to live on the hill here, we had DSL, one of the first areas to have DSL, which meant we now also had the oldest DSL equipment in the system. And that 768K, 128K combination I was saying earlier, that was pretty much the best you could get even today. So we had two problems. Our phone couldn't get us good DSL, and cable was not an option. They were used to seeing cable speeds from their own house and from their old location. And they moved into this neighborhood, and like me, they were trying to run a business out of their home. And they just completely, they ended up grabbing the bull by the horns and contacting both the cable company and the phone company and saying, hey, what can we do? They actually organized the neighborhood, and we did two things. One is we lobbied the phone company to update their DSL equipment. So we now have faster DSL. And in fact, that's what I was using. In fact, I still actually have it. It's currently a backup connection. I've got it connected to things like my Xbox for streaming and such. But our DSL connection is now 20 megabits down, 2 megabits up. As it turns out, the test for Facebook Live video that I did a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, was on that connection. And 2 megabits upload speed was not enough to get a good quality connection for what you're seeing right now. So, at the same time as they were lobbying the phone company to improve our DSL connection, they then also contacted the cable company and said, hey, what can you do? What would it cost? And the short answer, of course, is that it cost a lot. But we ended up splitting it across, I think, at least a dozen different residents. So we actually had them retroactively pull cable underground across all of these areas. And in fact, it was very interesting to watch. They have these horizontal drilling machines, and they had to avoid all of the pre-existing cables and connections and pipes and who knows what else is underground. But they actually pulled cable to about a dozen different homes here in our neighborhood. And as of, I think, a couple of weeks ago, I ended up with, again, business class cable internet service. Now, the good news is that I've got an awesome connection. I get like 150 megabits down. I'm getting something like 20 megabits up, which is plenty for what we're doing right now. And it's great for the backing up that I do for uploading videos. You're going to see me doing more videos in the future because now it's not nearly as painful to actually upload the videos and do something with them. The bad news, if you will, I'm not going to name names, but the cable company we have has a really bad customer service reputation. But they're the only game in town. I mean, if you want cable in this neighborhood, they're the people you deal with, and there you go. You have really no choice. However, the good news, if you want to call it that, is that I opted, once again, like the T1s I was mentioning earlier, I opted for business class service, which means I'm paying more, but in theory, I'm actually getting better service as a result at a minimum. We'll see. It remains to be seen. So far, my experience has been really good. They've been out here. They've run the cable. They've installed the equipment. The service has been running great for a couple of weeks. Because it's business class, it also happens to include phone. So we're currently experimenting with what the best way to run phone is. Our landline, I was running it through our old copper wire, our landline. And in fact, it was interesting because I had been using Vonage for a couple of years, running it over one of the faster DSL or one of the faster internet connections when I had those. And I got really spoiled by their feature set. So when I ended up dropping back to the copper landline, when I included their DSL, I went for the bundle. I went for phone and DSL. When I went back to the traditional landline, it was like dropping back about 20 years in terms of feature set. There were just stuff I could not do with my landline that I was used to doing. Things like getting my voicemail via email, which is something we ended up relying on a lot. So right now, because this cable internet also is a business service that includes phones, well, I went ahead and forwarded my landline to the cable internet's phone, and it seems to be working. And once again, we've got features more appropriate to the 21st century instead of the 30-year-old technology that our phone company is still kind of saddled with. So that's where we're at today. We've got cable internet running here right now. It seems to be working great. I've been very pleased with it. It is enabling something like this, Ask Leo Live, I'm calling it. I kind of toyed with calling it Facebook Fan Friday again, but that had connotations from when I used to do that back in a couple of years ago. So Ask Leo Live is something that I'm considering doing on a semi-regular basis here on Facebook. Facebook Live, it's the thing to do. Everybody seems to be doing it these days. I keep hearing from all sorts of places that you got to do Facebook Live. You got to market through Facebook Live. I have no idea if it's good for marketing or whatever. But what I see is it's another interesting way for me to be able to reach out and connect with you and perhaps maybe answer some questions in real time. So with that having been said, I'm going to look away from the camera here while I check out some of the comments that have been left on on the previous video, the previous live session, and see what kind of questions you may have. Just go ahead. If you've got questions, go ahead and post them in the comments. They do tend to scroll by a little quickly, so I apologize if I don't necessarily see it right away or happen to miss it, but I'm going to try. And also, like I mentioned in the previous video, I wish Facebook Live would let me do this with my desktop, but I can't. So what I've got is my desktop machine is over here off to the right, and my mobile phone is what I'm looking at when I'm looking at the camera. And there's half of my mobile phone screen is like 3 comments that are scrolling by from time to time. So I may not always necessarily see what's going on. Like I said, I really wish Facebook would let me do this with my webcam and my full-size monitor and all that kind of stuff, but I can't. Let's see. Maud left a question. My laptop doesn't keep the date and time after reading up on it. I changed the CMOS battery. Good first step. I also changed the power battery. Still doesn't keep the time past a few minutes. Any advice? Actually, no. It's going to depend a lot on the model of the computer that you're running, and I would actually get in touch with the manufacturer to see if they have any ideas why that might be happening. You did exactly the right thing the first step or two. The CMOS battery is exactly where you go first. If it loses, like if you turn the computer off and it comes back on as 1970, that's your CMOS battery, almost guaranteed. If replacing that doesn't solve the problem, then typically there's something else going on, but it could be so many other different things that you really want to have somebody look at it. And the reason I point you at the manufacturer is if it's a common symptom, they may be able to point you more directly at exactly what might be going on there. Let's see. Why might you get an error that the browser is not responding? So this happens a lot. In fact, I think I've got an article or two on AskLeo.com, so if I don't get the question answered correctly here, by all means, go search on AskLeo.com. You'll find the answer there. The problem is there's no real easy way to know specifically what the problem is. All it really means is that a script, JavaScript, is being used by a website that you're visiting to do something. And in order to do what it's doing, it's basically not responding to the browser's request for it to interact with it. That can happen for any number of different reasons. It can be a really badly written script. So if this is a random website that you've never been to before, it's very possible that it's the website's fault. More commonly, it is the fault of a toolbar or some other functionality that you may have added to your browser that's somehow interfering with the way the script is operating. And of course, malware can absolutely be one of the things that can cause this kind of stuff. So certainly, do the due diligence, do your scans for malware, see what you can do about getting it, make sure your machine is clean. The other thing, surprisingly, that can actually interact or can cause this kind of stuff is anti-malware tools. The way some of them work, and again, this is going to depend a lot on exactly which tool you're using and how you're using it and how it's configured, etc. But the way that many anti-malware tools work is they will actually insert themselves into your browser, sometimes in the form of a plugin, sometimes in the form of some other technology. And that can sometimes interfere with how scripts run. Remember, scripts are what you want your anti-malware tool to be kind of looking at because a lot of more recent threats are script-based. So it makes sense that they would be looking at the scripts, but sometimes in doing so, they can actually cause this kind of problem. So I would recommend, potentially temporarily disabling, only temporarily, but temporarily disabling your anti-malware's integration with your browser and seeing if that makes a difference. And naturally, the other thing, of course, to try, now that I'm saying it, is, of course, try a different browser. If you're using Chrome, try Firefox, try IE, one of the big three. Even Opera has gotten some good press just this morning, actually, from PC Magazine. So those are things to try at any rate. Let's see. How do I get rid of the Windows 10 icon on my taskbar? Yeah, I do not want 10. Yeah, absolutely. So there are definitely some tools. I don't have them off the top of my head. There's GWX Control Panel. If you do a Google search or just do a search on Ask Leo for that, you'll find the article that talks about it. It is a utility that you can install on your Windows 8.1 machine that will basically allow you to configure it to prevent the Windows 10 reminder, get rid of the icon, get rid of the files that may have been downloaded, and essentially just prevent the upgrade from happening on your machine. There's also something called, NeverTem from GRC, from Steve Gibson's company, that does something similar, except it's very, very simple. There's no configuration to it. It does something. I'm not exactly sure what it does. I think it just changes a couple of registry entries. I prefer GWX Control Panel because you get a little bit more visibility into exactly what's happening and a little bit more control over what you see. Let's see. What else we got going here? What other kinds of questions going here? Let's see. I'm trying to see. Well, I can't see all the questions. So, had to use an adapter for your mic. Can you say what it is and maybe a bit about your mic too? Sure. Yeah, and as Douglas is pointing out, there is I can't show it to you because, of course, I would lose my mic. I will try to post a link to the pieces of technology in the comments to this video when I'm done with the video. How's that? What I got is a little Y adapter for my phone. It actually has 4 rings on it, of all things, because it is both a mic and a headset adapter. So what it is, it's just literally a cable that goes in, has a plug at one end, and then 2 sockets that come out, and into one I can plug in my microphone. You know, it's interesting. You do these live things and the phone never ever rings. As soon as you go live, you start getting phone calls like crazy. Anyway, I've got a Y adapter. I believe I got it from Monoprice. It is specifically designed for doing exactly what this is. It takes that one socket, that one connector you've got on your phone, splits it into two, lets you plug in a microphone on one side and headphones on the other. The lavalier mic that I'm using, I've had this one for years. It's an Audio-Technica. I got it off of Amazon. Like I said, I'll point you to a link for it. Whenever you see me doing a stand-up video where I'm actually standing in front of a camera against a background of some sort, I'm usually wearing this microphone. In this case today, I've got it plugged into my phone. I also typically plug it into a digital voice recorder that I use then for those other types of videos. When I do webcam-based videos, like my weekly video, the past couple, I just recorded one this morning that should come out this weekend. I'm using this microphone here that is connected to a little mixing board off to the right here. But today, this is what I'm using. I'm actually pretty happy with the sound. It's much, much better than the microphone that would be on the phone because that would have a little bit more echo. It's further away from me, so the sound just wouldn't be as good. Let's see. So I'm still recommending not to use Windows 10. Funny you should ask. I'm actually updating the Windows 10 article, and it'll republish tomorrow. In fact, a little spoiler alert, the article's already updated and is already published, and you'll find it on Ask Leo if you just search for, should I upgrade to Windows 10? And my bottom line right now is to actually, Windows 10 is worth it. It's good. It's free. It's good. If you're considering Windows 10, I'm going to start recommending that you consider upgrading to Windows 10 while it's still free. Now, there's a bucket load of caveats with that because there are still lots of issues around Windows 10. Everything from compatibility checks that tell you you're compatible when you're not, to hardware that doesn't work when you're done, to software that may not necessarily work when you're done, to people just not liking it, to the perception of all of these privacy/security issues. So, but like I said, obviously, since I'm saying it's an okay thing to do, I'm not concerned about most of those issues. However, they do bite some people, and there's just no way around that with any kind of a major operating system upgrade. So what I'm recommending people do, you might expect, is back up first. Take a full system image backup of your machine first before you do anything. And in fact, that system image backup is also the way you would preserve your free Windows 10 installation if you actually want to preserve it beyond the July deadline. So let's say you try Windows 10 and you hate it, or some piece of hardware you have doesn't work. Some obscure or old piece of hardware you have that you rely on doesn't work. You simply restore that image backup, and you're back to where you were, and you know that Windows 10 is going to work for you until whatever that problem is gets resolved. However, let's say you know you don't want Windows 10 today. Well, one way to deal with it then is to take your backup image of your system today, upgrade to Windows 10, take a system image of that, revert to what you had before. Now, you're running what you had before, but you have this system image that you can then use a couple of months down the road to upgrade to Windows 10 when you're ready. I'm told, in fact, Fred Langa published a very nice article in Windows Secrets about this particular process. He actually has you going through and using the built-in reversion process so that when you're in Windows 10 and you're ready to roll it back to what you had before, you use Windows 10's own rollback, the one that works for 30 days only. And then he also suggests when you are then later ready to upgrade to Windows 10, you actually do the update so that your update process preserves all your files and that kind of thing. That assumes that the quote-unquote digital entitlement that they use continues to work. It's not a way to have 2 copies of Windows. You can only use one of those at a time. But once you've installed Windows 10 on your system once and preserved it, my understanding is that that machine that you installed it on is now entitled in some way that's been recorded to run Windows 10 for free later. That's why you could revert to your pre-existing operating system, continue to use that for a few more months as long as you've done this digital entitlement process or you've saved the image of your installed Windows 10. But by and large, right now, I'm starting to say that, yeah, Windows 10 is something that people can seriously consider unless there is a reason, unless they know of a reason to not do it, and unless they, and as long as they make sure to back up completely first, because like I said, it may tell you you're compatible, and at the end of the day, you may find out that you're not. So you want to be prepared for that eventuality as well. But look for the article. Like I said, the article's already been updated. It's on Ask Leo right now. Search for Should I Upgrade to Windows 10? And it's actually going to be republished tomorrow, which means slapping tomorrow's date on it, and it'll make it through the new article notification. It'll be on the homepage, and it'll be in next Tuesday's newsletter. Let's see. What else we got? Yeah, main issue with Windows 10 is older generation like my folks that can't cope with change. Yeah, I hear ya. Are there any skins, gizmos to make it look exactly like Windows 7? Well, exactly is no. Short answer for that one is no. But I've been strongly recommending something called Classic Shell. Classic Shell essentially replaces the Start menu and makes some tweaks to File Explorer to make them both more familiar. In reality, Classic Shell, it's been around forever. It's not necessarily a Windows 8 solution. I mean, it wasn't developed for Windows 8 or Windows 10. It was developed for something prior to that. It will actually allow you to choose the style of Start menu you want. If you want a Windows XP style Start menu, you can get it with Classic Shell. If you want a Windows 7 style Start menu, you can get it. You can tweak it. You can do all sorts of other interesting things. What I find is that most people's issue with Windows 10 is their initial reaction to the massively different Start menu if they're coming from Windows 7 or anything prior. And that tends to color their opinion of the entire experience. Now, granted, there's a lot of change in Windows 10, and over the coming months, I'm planning on doing some things I think they're going to be really interesting to help cover and help people exploit Windows 10 a lot better. But just getting the Start menu to be something more familiar, knowing how to just find the programs that you're used to finding in the places that you're used to finding them, that's one of the things that Classic Shell can really help people feel more comfortable about moving forward with. So that's my recommendation for exactly what you're suggesting. There's nothing that's going to make all of Windows 10 look like Windows 7, but we can at least hit the highlights, some of the important highlights with Classic Shell. So I think I've burned through enough data right now. I'm not necessarily capped, but I think I've done this enough. This has been an awesome experiment. I would love if you get an opportunity to throw a comment on this video after it's done and let me know if this is something that you find helpful, if you find it useful, and if it's something you think I should do more often, and how I might go about convincing more people to show up. Particularly if there's a better time of day. Obviously, I'm facing a number of different things here with respect to timing. I have to choose a time when the dogs are going to be relatively quiet. We haven't heard them today, yay. And other things going on. But if there's things we can tweak to make it more useful, more helpful, and add more value, get more questions answered, I'd love to do it. It's been kind of fun, and we'll leave it at that. So thanks again for watching. I really appreciate your being here. I really appreciate your being a fan of the fan page. And we'll talk again soon. Take care, everyone.